Hey, Dave Paulides from the CanAm Missing Project here for another video, a copyrighted video to our CanAm Missing Project webpage and YouTube. Thanks a million for all the mail. It's been fascinating to say the least, and I'm having a good time going through it and reading it, and I've actually read almost every comment everyone's made. And fascinating stuff, the way people think and the variety of different options. Good stuff. Thank you. Keep it coming. Today, since we're almost into springtime, I had a couple people recommend that maybe I talk about some safety precautions while you're on the trail. Whether you're a hunter, a hiker, mountain biker, whatever you are, you're going in the trails, take it seriously. A lot of people tend to go in the woods and think it's Disneyland out there. It's fun, it's safe, I'm not going to get hurt, I don't have to take any precautions. Wrong. I want you to think seriously every time you go in the woods. And most of the trips that I take, I always bring a backpack. And I have about 3 or 4 different types depending on the trip. I brought one with me today, and I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that I want everybody to look at when they go out to purchase a backpack. Number one, that it's light. Number two, these are hip straps. And that means that the 90% of the weight on this backpack rides on your hips and not on your shoulders and not on your neck. And it'll make for a much more comfortable day getting a pack that has these. Another idea is this pack has these back supports and back vents. This keeps the pack off your back and you don't sweat nearly as much. It's for a much more comfortable day. And I'm not a proponent for any of the material I'm going to show you today. I'm not representing it. This is just things that I use. Now, on this pack, it has a lot of different pockets and things. I like that, especially when you've got a pack on. Maybe it's heavy, you got it just right. You want to put something here and your partner, hey, just take out my camera, this and that. So it makes it easy for other people to get at things when you ask them. So, backpacks. I recommend going to your sporting goods store. I always go to REI, a lot of people there with some good knowledge. And each of the employees at that store are trained on specific parts of that store and they're experts at it. So ask them. Enough with the backpack. Water. You can live for days and days without food. You can't without water. Now, not only do I bring enough water for the day, I always bring more, a lot more. And if I don't, I always bring a device, and I lent mine out. I didn't have it today, but it looks like a large straw, and it's a water filtration system. Put the straw up right to a lake or a creek and drink right there, and it filters the water through a device. Never, ever, ever drink water out of a stream, creek, reservoir. I don't care how clean you think it is. Giardia is prevalent throughout North America. It will make you so sick it's ridiculous. So, don't do it. If you get Giardia, it's going to be bad. You'll have to go to the doctor. Ugh, nasty stuff. Some medics came up with this thing called Medpacks, MED packs. And I looked into them real heavily, and I carry one. It's a first aid kit for injuries when you're in the woods. It's super light. Medpacks, you can get them online. You should always carry some kind of first aid. Specifically, if you're a new packer, hiker, carry Band-Aids. I'll explain that in a minute. If you're going into an area that is high in elevation in North America, bring some mosquito repellent. It'll just ruin your day if those bugs are on you all the time. And years ago, I was taking a trip to the Yukon Territory, and we were walking through an area, my kids and I, and we see this cloud up in front of us. I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. It was a cloud of mosquitoes. So there's some stuff that REI makes called jungle juice. Super high concentrated. It's the only thing I've ever found that really keeps the mosquitoes off en masse. I'm sure it's really bad for you, but jungle juice at REI, that's the stuff. Now, if you're in the woods for a day, eventually you're going to have to go to the bathroom. Fact of life. And I was taking a trip a couple years ago, and I found these in the store, and they call it SHIT kit instructions. And all it is a little wet wipe, some toilet paper, and a dry wipe. And it gives you a little bag to put it in. So this stuff, lifesaver. Really cheap, good to carry. Now, everybody needs to, I don't care who you are, you need to carry a knife when you're in the woods. This knife, nice small knife, walking blade, good, put it on your hip. Now, that's a knife. Fixed blade, long, sharp. I carry this on my left hip all the time. And knives are important because you get in a tough situation and you need to make some fire. This will help you cut some things up, get it going. You got to cut your paracord blade, whatever. This is what you're going to need. Always, always carry a knife. Just talked about paracord. Carry it with you. This stuff can be used for a million different causes. As an example, you're in the back country and you break your leg and you need some kind of splint. Well, you can find wood in the woods, but this is going to tie the wood to your leg or whatever to get out. It can save your life. One of the million things paracord's for. Again, light, cheap, carry it. I've talked about this a lot, and I'm not a proponent of any type. This is an emergency blanket. Super light, super small. If you get hurt out there and you can't come out and you can't get cover, this can save your life. It'll keep you warm, keep the water off you, and everybody I know, I've given one of these to that hikes because I think this is a key component to safety. Trail map GPS. There's probably 5 different manufacturers of this. I believe they're probably all good. Again, I went to REI, I looked at like 5 of them, ended up getting one. It's actually the 3rd one I've had. But these are good to have. They'll show you where you are on the trail, the points you are from how far you are from the parking lot, etc. Good thing to have. And always carry extra batteries for this. Now, not only do I carry that, I also carry a hard copy map. And the hard copy map is important because if the GPS goes down, you drop it or break it, you got this. This map waterproof as well. So I can take it out in the elements, it'll be good. Maps. One of the oldest devices we have to carry on the trail, a compass. People get lost, a lot of them walk in circles. It's just the way it is. And you don't want to die out there in the woods walking in circles. A compass will give you the direction and you can continue to walk in that straight direction the entire time. And a lot of people will tell you that if you follow water, eventually it will get you to safety, which is true. If there's no water in your area and you're in the middle of the desert, you're going to want one of these. This and the map will get you to safety. If you don't know how to use a compass, you can learn pretty quick. People at the store will teach you or take a class. It's fascinating. These are great tools. Fire is life. And you got to carry some kind of device that gives you fire. This is an electronic lighter that I purchased. There's a lot of different kinds. I liked it because it's kind of cool, but it puts out kind of a neat flash and you can get things burning real easily. Whether it's waterproof matches, waterproof lighter, make sure you carry something that's waterproof. I'm always crossing creeks and things and I fall in, eventually it's going to get wet. I need things that are going to work when they're wet. So that's one of these things. Flashlight. Get caught in the woods late at night, you're going to need a flashlight or a headlamp. And I carry this. This is super bright. There's some flashlights out there. Looks like daylight when you turn them on. So you want to make sure you carry something that'll illuminate. Also, I like to go into deep, dark areas in the woods. Flashlight always comes in popular. One of the last things I want to talk about is people have made a lot of comments about guns. Don't carry a gun unless you're trained well with it and you're comfortable with it and you can hit something with it. Now, I've personally read many accounts of people attacked by mountain lions, bears, etc. And the last mountain lion attack I heard of was in California, where a man and a woman were hiking, and they fended off the mountain lion with a pen, P-E-N, and they stabbed it a couple times. So if you're a novice with a pistol, you want to carry a revolver. Very simple. Pull the trigger, it goes off. This is a semi-automatic. This is what I carry. This is what I carried on duty for 20 years. Colt Commander, 45 caliber. When I'm not in big bear territory, this is what I carry. Big bear territory, northern Washington, Idaho, Montana, I carry a 10 millimeter Glock 250 grain bullet. These are semi-automatic pistols. These are a little more complicated to use. I don't recommend you getting one unless you're very comfortable. So the military carries semi-automatic here in North America, USA. So that's my recommendations. I have never, ever read an account of anyone who disappeared who was carrying a firearm and a personal locator beacon. That's why the two in combination are intriguing to me. I've talked to many people over the years about these facts that I'm giving you about guns and personal locator beacons. And one of the smartest guys I've met in a long time said something interesting. He said, well, Dave, what if it's not the gun? What if it's not the personal locator beacon? What if it's the element that you're prepared, and maybe it's your attitude about survival that somehow is known by this subject that's looking at you? What if it's an element that we completely don't understand? One of the smartest guys I ever met at conferences, he's a speaker, his name is Richard Dolan. And Richard said to me one time, he said, Dave, I see these comments people make to you about, oh, it must be this, it must be that. And he said, you know, I think to myself, we're in this vast universe, and we tend to think that we're the top dog in the world, maybe in the universe. We're the smartest, we're the brightest. How insane is that? To think that we may have the ability to watch a few YouTubes and figure this out is pretty conceited. And he said, what if what is looking at us and what may be taking us has a motive that is completely beyond our understanding? What if it's something that's so beyond us that for us to fathom what they're doing may be for the good of their world, that it would just cause our head to spin on an axis? I said, Richard, you know, possibly completely true. Who really knows? But it's a great point. So I really like that high level conversation. Few things. I forgot to add, always carry a whistle. And a whistle when you're backpacking may seem weird. Dogs walking by. The whistle, you can blow a lot louder than you can talk. And when you're completely exhausted, that's what you want to do, is you want a whistle. Now we're going to talk about percentage of the population, and it's been brought up many times by people, and that is, what percentage of the population is German? And I've stated at conferences that there's a very large percentage of our population that is German. And I understand that. But I want everyone to understand something clearly, is that every physicist I have ever documented that has disappeared is German. And I'm sorry, but there's physicists from probably every nationality in the world, in existence in the world, and I can't find another one that isn't German that's missing. I'm just laying the facts on you folks. Somebody brought up a question about indigenous women and how many are missing in Canada, and there's a lot. And there's a lot in the US as well. Harvey Pratt, Native American chief, 50 years in law enforcement, my best friends, we talked about this. Indigenous women missing is a problem of crime on the reservation, and and within the areas that they live. Many times there's not enough law enforcement, education, and social assistance for these people. And alcohol and drug abuse runs rampant. And on top of that, there's just a criminal element of predation that exists in that area. Every case I've looked at of a missing indigenous woman points to criminal activity, not what we're doing. There's a famous Highway of Tears case in Canada. There's a RCMP task force that's been working that for years, and it all points towards crime. Questions about maps, my missing cluster map, and other maps that are submitted. I got to say, we all laugh every time we get a new map. We've had over 30 maps submitted where the people all say, Dave, this is an exact match to your map. And we just laugh. None of them we've seen have been exact matches. Some are interesting. Many of them, there's not one proof that what their map indicates is true. They'll say all kinds of things about, oh, this is a map of blah, blah, blah. Well, I've never heard of that, and I've never heard that that exists, but whatever. One last thing about hiking and backpacking. When you get new boots, you get new backpack, go load it up just like you're going to go on a hike, and go hike around your neighborhood for about an hour. Break it in. Because once you get in the woods and you start wearing this stuff, if it's uncomfortable or you have a blister, it's going to ruin your day. So you don't want to do that. Something that I don't talk about too often, but I put it in one of my books, is something about NABS, and that's the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, financed by the National Institute of Justice. And what that is that's the USA's DNA database for missing people. And people that go missing, law enforcement will take DNA from their relatives and they'll put it in the system, so if a body's found, they can match it against it. Well, years ago, somebody started following my work who was a NABS investigator. And to date, our organization has identified 9 people that were never in NABS's database that are now because of our research. And I really think that that's a big pat on the back to the type of work we're doing, that people have never even heard of these missing people until we brought them up. Talk about current events. Go to the mailbag. Going back to the Germans that we talked about. It's a letter. Hi, David. I'm a newcomer to your work and have dived in wholeheartedly. Well done, and I admire what you do, as it's extremely important. I've just returned from a week assignment overseas and am getting caught up with your YouTube channel, your website, and your books. Below information may not be significant as unique events, but it does corroborate your work in a general sense. I'm a retired RCMP officer currently living in California. In the mid-1980s, I had occasion to be posted to RCMP headquarters in Ottawa. My choice of a career path, as with most jobs, had not yet taken place, and I was in the beginning of my career. I was assigned to a missing persons unit in the Arctic for about a year. I'm sure you know that working and living in harsh conditions, especially the Arctic, comes with a lot of risk, but these disappearances were odd. My assignment was to coordinate contacts with surviving relatives and advising them of their loss, dispose of their effects, and if possible, explain the circumstances of their disappearance. I was asked to go into this section because of my language skills. It seems that disappearing people, all men, were German hikers and/or tourists. Why be a tourist in the Arctic? During that year, I had a file containing at least 3 disappearances on Baffin Island and 1 on Ellesmere Island. I can't say if there were any non-German hikers that disappeared. That may require some checking, as I tasked only to deal with the German citizens in this letter. The time they went missing was in summer and late fall. I recollect that 4 missing men were totally alone and did not trek with partners or anyone else. The 3 on Baffin Island started as Inquinat, Penguinic, and Pond Inlet. I'm sorry I do not have exact information, but I recollect that each had basic survival equipment and was decked out in modern, efficient clothing and had a trek plan that was submitted to local authorities. They also had one-person tents, cooking equipment, knives, and food for a period of time. I don't recall if they had transponders. This was also before cell phones, but they were given a strict reporting schedule. No mention of satellite phones. Sat phone is something else that I carry besides what I've mentioned here. Back to the letter. There were eventually no computers in the RCMP at this time. Some were simply data collectors and information terminals, and it was still too technology early to map trends and perform any analysis like we can do today. The fourth person on Ellesmere Island was similarly prepared and monitored to the extent that was possible on that island. Search and rescue resources, especially during the 80s, were virtually non-existent in the winter. The men were middle-aged, none older than 45, extremely well-educated. At least one was an MD, a physician, and another had a PhD. Fit and athletic according to their relatives, dedicated outdoorsmen with substantial history of previous trekking in other parts of the world. None of the men knew each other, and they were from different parts of Germany. As you can guess, when they did not return to their designated places and times, searchers were mobilized. It appears that they advised their families back home of only a basic timeline, and that Canadian search and rescue techniques, minimal as they were, revealed nothing after an immense search. What did happen was that by the next year's summer thaw, for the two trekkers, sorry I can't remember the ones, they only found some equipment and clothing, no bodies. The total amount of equipment was far less than what they started out with. The same happened to the clothing. I seem to recall a shirt, a walking stick, a ripped portion of a tent, not much else. There was very little to be collected and sent back to their relatives. Unfortunately, my exact recollection regarding the men on Baffin Island is lost in time. I do not recall if the third person on Baffin Island was found or not. The chap on Ellesmere completely disappeared, and some elements of his campsite was found. That island is so far north, I wonder why anyone would want to visit. Sorry for the lack of substantial details, but at the time I also found it odd that there were that many Germans going missing on these hikes and disappearing. Granted, it is not difficult to go missing in the wilderness, but why was it so coincidental? Looking into your work, I recall that a large portion of the people you reported missing were also well-educated, fit outdoorsmen from Germany. I hope this contributes. Fascinating letter. Now, folks, I want you to think about it. We're in this vast world we call Earth, and I'm talking about this little piece of it called United States. Here's something that's happening in Canada. And this RCMP officer was assigned to investigate these disappearances of missing people in the Arctic. I've written about cases in the Arctic in my books, and they are baffling. So, how did these German guys disappear? Why? And what were the circumstances? They don't even know. But I think this is validation that there's something to our research that is puzzling, because it even puzzled this professional. I don't do this very often, but I'm going to read a story to you that I wrote in one of my books, and it's from Australia. And I read this story because I think it affects almost all of the incidents I've written in my books that deal with weather. Here's the story. It's called Byamee, B-Y-A-M-E-E. In 1898, there was a sergeant employed by the New South Wales Mounted Unit named W.G. Noble. His job was to travel to out-of-the-way locations and keep the peace. One of his keys to survival was to make friends with our Aboriginal tribes and keep up communication between his organization and their tribal activities. In 1899, Noble wrote an article titled, "Hunter Vanished in Storm." The story was published again in November 26, 1949 edition of the Sydney Morning Herald. Here it is. Noble was riding in 115-degree heat, felt as though he was melting. He rode into an area of Lake Burrilla to investigate, as he described, the mysterious disappearance of dead wool during the devastating drought of 1898. So I always think about why he was there. Why was it mysterious, and why were these things disappearing? He was also in the area to investigate rustlers. He stated that he was riding when banks of heavy clouds loomed over Blair and Coolabah forests beyond the Spinifex and Morilla ridges, and there were ominous rolls of distant thunder, end of quotes. Anyone who has read my books knows that bad weather is involved in many of the disappearances of people. Sometimes it appears just as the disappearance occurs, sometimes just after. Noble had 15 miles to travel until he reached his destination. He decided to stop at an Aboriginal camp to get cover. He described this location as, quote, pine woods on the shores of a stretch of waters known to the natives as Lake Boorlilla, Booroollilla. The sergeant described a chaotic scene in camp. Noble said the area was in extreme turmoil. Dogs were yelping, women were running and shouting. It looked like complete chaos. As soon as he dismounted his horse, he was waved over to a darter and told to take cover inside by the chief. It was large enough inside for he and his horse. Just as he escaped inside, the storm cut loose. Almost nonstop lightning, thunder, rain, hail. It seemed as though the weather gods had gotten angry and were unleashing a torrent on this small camp. I will now quote the sergeant's article directly as the wording is important. Quote, after some time, when I looked out for some sign of the storm abating, I saw to my amazement a towering old warrior with long gray hair and beard striding towards the lake on the shores of which he stood and waved fiercely with his wizened arms. Then he began to chant in his deep booming voice as though challenging the elements to mortal combat. Even while watching, a blinding flash of lightning struck down. It left a dense vapor-like mist, which completely enveloped the warrior and hid him from view. After it lifted, I hurried over and was astounded to find that he had disappeared. Later in the article was this: the chief told me that the old warrior I had seen was a great hunter named Biami the Mighty. Just as Biami had vanished, the camp began a death chant. The sergeant described the chant as, quote, eerie and poignant that it haunted me, end of quotes. The article ended. 50 years later, the sergeant added this, quote, although half a century has rolled by, the death chant to which I listened to was undoubtedly voiced during a big storm by a Burra tribe of Aborigines, which then inhabited the area around Angledool, Lightning Ridge, and the Naran River, and its lakes along the Queensland border. We never found the body of the old man, and as a result, the tribe was confirmed in its beliefs that he had been wafted off Earth by unfriendly spirits. End of quote. And I state, this is a fascinating first-hand account of something very unusual. The behavior of the village around the disappearance and the behavior after truly is unique. Aborigines from Australia, North America, and the U.S., First Nations people of Canada have beliefs and stories that have been carried for centuries. They each have lived in the wildest of locations of their respective areas. They have seen and experienced things that people in the city will never understand or experience themselves. Many individuals refuse to even entertain the legends of these people carry. Here we have an educated white man from civilization that was able to view something rarely, if ever, seen by a city dweller. The event that was described can add some light to what I've documented in these books. I've stated that the disappearances are related to water. Biami vanished on the banks of a lake. I've also stated that bad weather is associated with disappearances. The warrior vanished during a horrific storm in the presence of others. The description of a mist that enveloped the area as Biami disappeared almost seems like a magic trick that you'd see in Las Vegas. This is the closest incident I've ever found where someone described another disappearing in the bush. If you are new to this topic, you may brush this off as another bizarre story that is probably fictional. Because of the facts involved and the matter it evolved, I believe it happened. Australia and North America have facts associated with disappearances that are almost identical. Well, there you go. I'm going to present you things that are factual, that have justification for what I've written in my books. And I've just given you two: water, weather, Germans. There's some people out there that just cannot comprehend that this may possibly be true. And as we take this walk with my videos, I hope we can educate ourselves as to what's happening in the woods. Thank you for watching. I'm heartened that you guys stay tuned and support our channel. If you can, give me a thumbs up and be a subscriber. I'll see you soon.